In previous episodes of the history of the Peckforton Light Railway, you will have seen how the railway has evolved from its creation in 2004 to 5, through various innovations and extensions, for example, the transition from track power to battery power and radio control in 2013, through to 2021, when much of the line's infrastructure has been completed, such as the boneworks to the right in this clip. We have now reached 2022. As was foretold in part 5 of the line's history, there have been some interesting new developments on the railway, in addition to the expected maintenance jobs and various minor and full-scale running sessions. So, with no further ado, let's take a look at what I and the railway have been up to this year. In last year's history video, I hinted that I was turning my attention to the Glyn Valley Tramway and its rolling stock, and so I spent a couple of months 3D drawing and printing a range of GVT stock in 7mm scale, with plans to make a small indoor layout. However, it soon became apparent that this project was distracting me from my main interest, the outdoor Peckforton Light Railway, and so the 7mm stock has gone into storage until the day comes when I get too old and decrepit to manage the garden and need something to keep me busy indoors. All my 7mm 3D files are now available on Thingiverse, by the way. So, with spring in the air, it was back out into the garden to run some trains. One of the disadvantages in making videos is that low-level line-side shots often highlight flaws and deficiencies, such as places where the track ballast has disappeared. A couple of hours was spent patching up these bald spots using my usual method. A 3-to-1 mix of horticultural grit and cement, applied as a dry mix, and brushed into place, before being sprinkled with water using the hosepipe attachment on a fine mist setting. Another anomaly was revealed by video at Beeston Market Station, where coaches on the bay platform had a distinct list to port. The track here was levered up and supported by chunks of tile before being reballasted. And so to developments with rolling stock on the PLR. One of the members of the Garden Rails Forum, which I frequent, asked if the 7mm Glyn Valley stock could be rescaled to 16mm scale. Certainly, said I in all innocence. Inevitably, I had to check this was actually feasible, and so all my 7mm stock has not only been rescaled, but printed out and constructed, mostly in 15mm scale, which is my default on the PLR, but the coaches and mineral wagons have also been rescaled to 16mm. All these files are available on the Garden Rails Forum as free downloads. A further development with coaching stock has been the long-awaited completion of the third and final Southwold Railway six-wheeled Clemenson coach. Its construction was delayed mostly because of the lack of availability of Bachmann 24.5mm diameter metal wheel sets, though it's also because this project kept slipping down the priority list. I'm very pleased with the way the Clemenson six-wheelers perform. On a recent short running session of a mixed train, at some point, as I was running the train forwards and in reverse, nearly every item of rolling stock became derailed, even the loco, with the exception of the six-wheeler, which remained resolutely on the track despite a fair bit of toing and froing. Of course, now I've made that statement, I will probably get nothing but trouble with them. Last year, you will have seen that I drew and 3D printed a County Donegal Railways luggage van. But as I had no scale drawings, I used photos of a grounded van body as a guide. It turned out to be far too small, and so, with dimensions of a surviving van provided kindly by the Transport Museum in Derry, I rescaled the drawing, 3D printed it, and also produced a far more accurate chassis. In addition, I have now modified the drawings of the Southwold Railway six-wheeled Clemenson open wagon, which I produced last year, to create two variants, based on photos and drawings in various books and articles. One variant has additional strapping on the drop-down doors, while the other has the name Moy, the local coal merchant, embossed on the side. Turning to aspects of operation and control, I was unhappy with the Backman motor block which I had used to power the Glyn Valley loco. It had been taken from a tramcar and so was underpowered. I decided to make my own motor block, using an MFA Como gearbox motor, a 3D printed chassis, wheels from SL Engineering, and a toothed belt and sprockets, normally used on 3D printers. It does the job, but it too lacks the sort of power I get from LGB motor blocks. However, it is considerably cheaper. As the supply of my usual Deltang receiver controllers has more or less dried up, I used a Micron MR603A receiver to control this loco. It's about the same size as the Deltang RX65 with most of its features, and it can handle from 5 to 20 volts at up to 3 amps. It was wired into the loco in exactly the same way as all my Deltang-controlled locos, in this case with a MyLoco sound card. Because I was an early adopter of Deltang equipment, I discovered that some of my oldest Deltang transmitters weren't compatible with the Micron receiver. It was a fairly quick and easy fix to replace the Deltang transmitter board in each of the transmitters with a more recent version, obtained from Micron. One of the difficulties I have is finding 15 or 16 mm scale figures wearing clothing appropriate for the 1930s. In the past, I have lengthened skirts, made hats, and even added trouser turn-ups to figures in present-day clothing to make them more appropriate. Having bought a few 3D printed figures from Dean at Design Scan Print 3D, I emailed him asking if he had any plans to supply 1930s figures. When he explained that it was difficult to find people to scan wearing such clothing, I suggested he could come and scan me and fellow members of our local amateur dramatic society. We have a wardrobe full of appropriate costumes. He came, scanned, printed, and then sent me some complimentary figures for my railway. Here are just a few of them. Although the scanning and 3D printing process homogenizes the facial features somewhat, it's surprising how recognizable they are. It'll be strange having friends and neighbours waiting on platforms for trains on the PLR next season. And so, to operations on the railway. A fair few running sessions took place, some of which I filmed. One such session was designed primarily to focus on some newly devised freight stock categories to make the programming of my Scion pocket computer easier. Another session followed the special delivery of a new gear wheel to the watermill. These videos are available to watch on YouTube. And so we reach the end of another year on Peckforton Light Railway. As you can see, quite a lot has happened this year, and there is always plenty still to do. I already have a few projects in mind for the coming year, and this video clip forms just one part of those plans. So you'll have to see the next thrilling instalment to find out what it is.